It started with something ordinary, a lease agreement, a set of keys, and a woman who spoke with the kind of calm authority that made you straighten up without knowing why. Her name was Evelyn. 40 years old, elegant, composed, and carrying that quiet kind of beauty that doesn't beg to be noticed. It just is long black hair, usually tied loosely at the back, and eyes that seemed to see more than you said. When I moved into the upstairs apartment of her old suburban home, I expected silence, the kind that comes with empty hallways and closed doors. But the walls had a life of their own. Every creak of the stairs, every whisper of her footsteps below reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone. The first time we spoke beyond pleasantries was over something trivial, the shower leaking. She came upstairs to check, clipboard in hand, hair falling loose from its tie. She smelled faintly of jasmine and rain. "Sorry for the trouble," she said, crouching beside the tub, her voice low and smooth. "It's no trouble," I replied, trying not to watch the way a strand of hair fell over her cheek. She glanced up then, brief, but enough to catch the flicker of something in her eyes. Recognition? Curiosity? Maybe both. She stood, brushing her hands against her jeans, and I caught the smallest smile at the corner of her lips. "You're younger than I expected," she said lightly, almost teasing. Should I take that as a compliment or a warning? Her laugh, soft, restrained, filled the small space, echoing more than it should have. Maybe both. From that moment, the air between us shifted. Every conversation carried a trace of awareness, the kind that lingers in pauses and glances that last half a second too long. She tried to keep her tone professional, but there was warmth beneath it, a quiet interest she didn't hide well. That evening, I heard her downstairs, faint music playing, the sound of her moving about. I told myself to ignore it, to focus on unpacking, but my mind wandered back to the curve of her smile, the confidence in her movements, the soft, steady rhythm of her voice. When she knocked on my door the next morning to drop off the rent receipt, she caught me mid-coffee, hair messy, still half asleep. She laughed quietly. "You're not much of a morning person, are you?" "Depends on a reason to wake up," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes met mine. That momentary silence again, charged but unsaid. Then she handed me the receipt and turned to leave. As she walked down the stairs, she said over her shoulder, almost playfully, "Try to keep quiet up here. These old floors carry every sound." I smiled, watching her disappear below. If only she knew, her voice was already the loudest thing in my head. Days turned into a rhythm. Quiet mornings, coffee by the window, the soft hum of Evelyn's footsteps downstairs. We barely spoke, yet every sound she made seemed to fill the space between my thoughts. The creak of her chair, the faint melody she played while cleaning, even the way she sighed when she thought no one could hear. It all became part of my routine. I told myself it was harmless curiosity, that I was just aware of her because she lived below. But awareness turned into distraction. Distraction turned into anticipation. Every time I heard her car pull into the driveway, my pulse kicked up before my mind caught up. One evening, she asked for help bringing in groceries. The sun was setting, spilling gold through the kitchen windows when I walked in. She stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair tied in a messy bun, the neckline of her shirt soft from wear. There was nothing glamorous about it, and yet she was stunning in the most effortless way. "Thank you," she said, smiling as I set the bags down. Didn't realize how heavy these would be. "No problem," I said, but my voice came out lower than I intended. She reached for a jar on the top shelf, stretching slightly. Her hand brushed mine when I passed it to her. It wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't an accident either. That single touch felt like a spark under my skin, too brief to mean something, too real to mean nothing. She must have felt it too, because her movement slowed. Her hand lingered for half a second before she drew back, clearing her throat softly. "You really shouldn't be helping your landlady like this," she said, trying to make it sound light. "Why not?" Her eyes flicked toward mine, steady, unreadable. "Because it blurs things." "Things?" I asked. "The lines," she said quietly, turning away to unpack the groceries. "You're my tenant. I'm your landlord. Simple as that." But the words didn't sound convincing. Not to her, not to me. I stayed a moment longer, watching the way the late sunlight caught in her hair. You really believe that? I asked softly. She paused, hands stilling over the counter. I have to. There was something in her tone, something that didn't belong to rules or rent agreements. Something lonely. Before leaving, I said, you don't have to stay quiet all the time, you know? I don't mind the noise. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite denial. Some noise isn't meant to be heard. That night, I lay awake listening. The faint creak of her steps, the sound of water running, the soft hum of a woman trying too hard to keep her life contained beneath her own roof. The more she tried to keep things quiet, the louder the silence between us became. The following week carried an odd stillness, like the air after lightning strikes, but before the thunder finds its voice. Evelyn didn't visit upstairs anymore. She left rent receipts in my mailbox, kept her tone short when we crossed paths, and avoided eye contact just long enough for me to know she was trying. But distance doesn't erase awareness, it sharpens it. Every morning, I'd catch the sound of her kettle whistling downstairs. Same time, same soft clink of a mug against the counter. Sometimes she'd open the back door, and the scent of her perfume, jasmine and something faintly woody, would drift up through the open stairwell. I started to wonder if she noticed my footsteps the way I noticed hers. One evening, I came home late from work. Her light was still on. Through the thin crack in her kitchen curtains, I saw her sitting at the table, a half-empty glass of wine beside her, her hair loose, eyes lost in thought. She wasn't the composed, careful woman I'd first met. She looked tired, human. I knocked softly on the door. She hesitated before answering. You shouldn't be downstairs this late, she said, her voice quiet but not cold. I saw your light, I replied. You okay? She gave a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Do landlords tell their tenants about their problems now? Only if they stop pretending they don't have any. That earned me a glance, sharp but vulnerable. You don't know me well enough to say that. I think I do, I said, leaning slightly against the doorframe. You work too late, you don't let anyone close, and you hide behind jokes when you're hurting. Her expression softened just a little, a flicker of something that looked like recognition. You talk like you've been watching me, she murmured. Maybe I've just been listening, I said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked faintly in the kitchen. The air between us carried the warmth of something unsaid, fragile, dangerous, magnetic. She finally stepped closer, arms folded loosely across her chest. You're kind, but you don't understand what you're getting into. Then explain it. It's not about you, she said. It's about what people will say, what they'll think. Her words carried weight, years of restraint, of worrying about the world's gaze. I could hear the hesitation wrapped around every syllable. I don't care what they think, I said quietly. She looked up at me then, her eyes dark and searching. And for the first time, she didn't look away. You should, she whispered. Because I do. There it was, the truth she'd been fighting to hold back. The line between us wasn't just drawn by rules or roles. It was drawn by fear. But that night, as I turned to leave, I knew neither of us could pretend that line hadn't already begun to fade. The days after that conversation were quieter, not empty, but dense with the kind of silence that hums beneath the surface, waiting to be broken. I could feel her presence through the walls. The faint shuffle of her slippers in the hallway. The sound of her turning pages at night. Even when we didn't speak, her nearness had a weight like gravity. Sometimes, I'd catch her outside, tending to the rose bushes near the front steps. She'd pretend not to notice me, but her shoulders always stiffened just slightly when I passed. Once, a breeze caught the loose ends of her black hair and brushed them across her face. I wanted to tuck them away, to tell her she didn't have to hide behind that careful composure she always wore, but I didn't. I knew that kind of closeness came with a cost she wasn't ready to pay. That evening, rain started, light at first, then heavier, drumming steadily against the roof. The kind of night that made everything slow down. I was halfway through reading when a soft knock echoed from the door. It was her. Sorry, she said, her voice low. The power went out downstairs. My phone's dead, and I can't find a flashlight. I motioned her in. The faint glow from my desk lamp painted her face in soft amber tones. There were raindrops on her hair, glinting like tiny pieces of glass. She looked around the room, neat, small, quiet. "You keep it clean," she said. "I wasn't expecting that." I smiled. "You say that like you've been imagining otherwise." That earned a small laugh, the first real one I'd heard in weeks. "Maybe I have," she admitted. We sat for a while, listening to the rain. The room felt warmer with her in it, though the space between us stayed careful. She brushed her fingers against her sleeve, nervous. I noticed the faint tremor, the way her eyes avoided mine, even when her thoughts clearly didn't. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" I asked softly. She looked up. "Pretending what?" "That this doesn't mean anything." Her lips parted, then closed again. The silence stretched, heavy with everything she wasn't saying. "Don't," she whispered finally. "You make it sound simple." "It's not. I know," I said, my voice low. "But that doesn't make it wrong." For a moment, the storm outside seemed to echo her heartbeat. Her hand brushed against mine, light, hesitant but deliberate. The air stilled. Then she pulled away, her breath shaky. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Then stop standing so close," I murmured. She closed her eyes just once, as if steadying herself. Then she turned toward the door. "Good night," she said, but the way her voice trembled told me she didn't want to leave. When the door shut, the scent of rain and her perfume lingered in the air, soft, warm, and utterly inescapable. After that night, something between us changed, not in words but in rhythm. Every small moment felt amplified. The pause when she handed me the mail, the faint smile when our eyes met on the stairs, the shared silence when we both lingered a little too long before saying goodbye. Evelyn had always carried herself like someone who lived by quiet rules. Everything measured, everything proper. But lately, even she seemed unsure which rules still applied. It was late one Thursday when it happened. I'd just come back from work, exhausted and soaked from the drizzle outside. Her kitchen light was on again. I could see her shadow moving slowly across the blinds, pacing. I don't know what made me knock. Maybe instinct, maybe something deeper. But when the door opened, her face softened in surprise. "You look cold," she said, stepping aside. "Come in before you catch something." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed the same hesitation I felt. The scent of cinnamon and rain filled the room. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. Nothing meant to impress, but somehow that made her even more striking. We sat at her table. The room was dim except for the warm light above us. For a while, the only sound was the rain tapping against the window. "You've been quiet lately," I said gently. She smiled faintly. "I'm trying to make peace with the noise in my head." "Does it have to do with me?" She exhaled, her gaze falling to her hands. "You make it hard to forget that I'm supposed to be older, supposed to know better. And yet, you still let me in. That's what scares me," she said. Her voice cracked just slightly. "Because I know where this leads." The honesty in her tone hit me harder than I expected. I reached out, resting my hand lightly over hers. She froze but didn't pull away. Her skin was warm, soft, trembling slightly. "Tell me to stop," I whispered. She looked up, eyes glistening under the low light. "You think I can?" A small silence followed, the kind that speaks louder than anything else. The rain outside turned into a steady rhythm, like the world was holding its breath with us. "I don't want to ruin your life," she said quietly. "Or mine." "Maybe we're not ruining anything," I replied. "Maybe we're just tired of pretending we don't feel this." Her hand tightened around mine for the briefest moment. Then she let go, standing abruptly. "You should go," she said. I stood too. "Do you want me to?" She hesitated. Her eyes softened, conflicted, yearning, afraid. "No," she whispered, "but I think I have to." As I left, I caught my reflection in her window, her silhouette still standing there, motionless, watching. The truth was out now, even if neither of us dared to name it. And once spoken, even silence couldn't take it back. The days that followed were restless. The air between us had thickened with unspoken things, too heavy to ignore, too fragile to confront. I kept hearing her words echo in my head. Asterisk, you make it hard to forget that I'm supposed to know better. Asterisk, she started avoiding me again, though not very successfully. I'd catch her eyes through the stairwell railing when I came home, both of us pretending we weren't looking. She'd leave the rent receipt under my door instead of handing it to me, but she never stopped signing it with a small note, a habit she hadn't even realized she'd kept. Then came Saturday. The rain had finally cleared, replaced by a warm, golden afternoon, the kind of weather that makes everything feel honest. I was sitting by the window when I heard her voice downstairs, soft but strained. She was on the phone. "I can't keep doing this," she said, her tone tight. "He's too young, too kind. I'm the adult here. I should have stopped this before it started." My chest tightened. I didn't want to hear more, but I couldn't move. A moment later, her voice cracked. "He doesn't even realize how easily he could break me." Something inside me shifted. Not pride, not anger, but a deep ache. She wasn't rejecting me. She was protecting herself. That evening, I went downstairs. She was standing in the doorway, hair tied back, wearing a simple white blouse and jeans. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "I heard you earlier," I said quietly. Her lips parted, but no words came. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," I continued, "but I can't pretend I didn't hear you." Her shoulders tensed. "Then you know why this has to stop." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "I don't think it can." Her expression softened, but only for a heartbeat. "You're just saying that because you haven't lived long enough to regret things." "Maybe," I said, "but I've lived long enough to know when something feels real." She turned away, pressing a hand to her chest as if steadying herself. "You think this is easy for me? Every time you look at me like that, I feel like I'm walking toward a cliff." "Then maybe I'm the one who's supposed to catch you," I whispered. Her eyes flickered toward mine, sharp, wet, uncertain. "Don't say things like that," she murmured. "You make me forget why I said no." The room fell into silence again, the kind that hums between two people who've run out of reasons to lie to themselves. "I'm not asking for forever," I said finally. "Just honesty." Her breath trembled. "Honesty is the problem," she said, her voice barely audible. "Because the truth is, I do feel it." She stopped herself there, as if the confession itself burned. Then she stepped back, whispering, "Please, go upstairs." I wanted the air between us changed after that night. Heavier, quieter, like something fragile waiting to break. We both carried on pretending things were the same, but even the smallest details betrayed us. When I passed her in the hall, she'd paused for a fraction too long before speaking. When she handed me the mail, her fingers brushed mine a little slower than before. We didn't talk about what happened, or what almost did, but it lived there in the silence, in every heartbeat that filled the spaces between our words. Then came the evening that stripped the distance away completely. I was fixing a loose hinge on the upstairs window when the thunderstorm hit. The power went out a few minutes later. From below, I heard a faint noise, something between a crash and a cry. Without thinking, I rushed downstairs. Evelyn was kneeling on the floor beside a broken vase. Water and petals scattered across the kitchen tiles. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her voice trembled. Her hair clung to her face, damp from the rain blowing in through the window. I crouched beside her, helping gather the pieces. One small cut traced her palm, a thin red line. "You're bleeding," I said softly. "It's nothing." I took her hand gently, inspecting the cut. My thumb brushed her wrist. Her pulse raced under my touch. When I looked up, her eyes were already on me, wide and unguarded. "Why do you keep doing this?" she whispered. "What?" "Looking at me like I'm someone you're allowed to want." The word struck deep. "Because I do," I said. "Because every time I try not to, it feels like lying." Her breath caught. The storm outside roared, lightning flashing briefly through the window, painting her face in silver light. She closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free. "You don't understand," she murmured. "This isn't just about us. I have a life, a reputation. And what about what you feel?" I cut in, my voice quiet but steady. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she stepped back, shaking her head. "Don't make this harder." "I'm not trying to," I said, "but I can't keep pretending I don't feel something real." Her expression wavered, torn between fear and the pull she'd been denying for weeks. Finally, she whispered, "Then stop making me choose." She turned to leave, but I caught her wrist, not roughly, just enough to make her pause. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I just need you to admit it too." The silence stretched, filled only by the rain. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "You think I don't?" For a moment, everything stilled, the storm, the air, even time. Then she pulled her hand free, her voice shaking. "Go upstairs," she said. "Please." When I finally did, the sound of her quiet sobs drifted up through the floorboards, proof that the wall between us had already cracked, even if neither of us was brave enough to cross it yet. Days passed, and the storm's echo seemed to linger in both of us. We spoke less, though our silence said more than any words could. The distance felt deliberate now, a truce built on exhaustion, not peace. One Saturday morning, I woke early to the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. The world outside was still, sunlight breaking through the blinds, painting soft gold across the walls. I hesitated before going down, not sure if she'd want to see me. But when I reached the kitchen, she was already there, sitting at the table, 2 mugs in front of her. She didn't look surprised to see me. "I thought you might be up," she said quietly. "You never sleep in." Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but her eyes, they carried the weight of everything we hadn't said. I sat across from her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was tender, fragile, human. "I've been thinking," she said finally, "about what you said that night." I waited, not trusting myself to interrupt. "I was scared," she continued. "Not of you, of what it would mean to feel something again. I built a life around being careful. And then you came along and made me remember what it's like to be alive." The confession hung between us, warm and heavy. "You don't have to be careful with me," I said. A soft laugh escaped her, tired but real. "You make it sound easy. Maybe it doesn't have to be hard." She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You're young," she said, though without the defensiveness from before. "You still believe things can be that simple." I smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why you need me." Her eyes softened. "Maybe." She reached across the table then, her hand finding mine. Her touch was steady this time. No hesitation, no retreat. The morning light caught the faint smile lines around her eyes, the glint in her dark gaze. "I don't know what this is yet," she said, "but I don't want to keep pretending it isn't something." I nodded slowly. "We'll figure it out. Together." For the first time, she didn't correct me. Outside, the neighborhood began to stir. Cars starting, birds calling, life returning. But inside that small kitchen, time felt suspended. Her thumb brushed the back of my hand, and in that simple touch, everything that had been restrained for weeks found its quiet release. No grand confessions, no promises, just understanding and peace. The kind of ending that doesn't close a door, but leaves it slightly open, letting light spill through. And maybe, for us, that was enough.